We are a nation beaten, broken and battered, while the Germans, our allies during the Great War, would suffer a lot, losing important parts of their empire. It was nothing compared to us. The Treaty of Saint-Germain removed 60% of our Austrian lands and limited our army to a measly 70,000. It also ended the reign of the Habsburgs for good, and after failed attempts to unite with Germany during 1920, a new republican constitution was enacted. Since then, we've seen government after government unable to deal with the rising revolutionary fever on our streets, both from the left communist KPÖ and the Valkist Soldiers' Ring supported by the German government. This internal threat, together with the threat of the German Reich seeking violent unification, puts us in a precarious position as maybe the nation in Europe with the most uncertain future. There isn't much we can do about this, however. Instead, the government's focus lies mostly on economic matters. Since the bank crash of 1931, our economy has slowly recovered, but we must continue. Taking another loan, we will invest it into economic expansion projects. In Vienna, we modernized our industrial logistics while also industrializing Burgerland and Tyrol, especially focused on Burgerland, where we even commissioned a second civilian factory. When I told you there was nothing we could do about the external threats, that wasn't fully true. So with the French now looking away, we can exploit some loopholes in the Treaty of Saint-Germain. While we need approval to build new factories, nothing states we can't purchase privately owned factories for military purposes. And while we aren't allowed to further arm our army, the Heimwehr is still considered a civilian organization. So arming them, despite their somewhat reactionary nature, will significantly improve our defensive posture. By strengthening paramilitaries in both Burgenland to defend against Hungarian revanchism and Graz to strengthen our presence in the city, our secret mobilization has put us on par with the Italian military industry, though of course less efficient due to the secrecy. The following 4 months, the slow economic growth would steadily continue, granting us some hope of a stable future, but that would all come crashing down on a Monday, a Black Monday. A market collapse over in London spread over the world, causing all our economic gains to vanish overnight. This economic crisis would fuel the fire on the streets already existing, with clashes between Republican militias, the OS of Kurt Schuschnigg, allied with the current Chancellor Dollfuss, and the Heimwehr led by Ernst Rüdiger. With fighting turning more and more bloody and strikes being declared in Vienna, there was nothing stopping a complete meltdown of Austrian politics. Dollfuss would attempt to mobilize the army to crush the Republican militias, only to be ordered down by the more moderate president and cabinet members. But pushing further, he couped the government, closing down the Nationalrat and reinstating his order. But Valkist militias were quicker, storming the chancellery and killing Dollfuss after he refused to declare unification with Germany. While Schuschnigg is set to succeed as chancellor, the Heimwehr continues to resist until they both agreed to meet for talks on the negotiation table. This opened up the opportunity for a new player, Otto von Habsburg. Proposing himself as a middleman for the negotiations, both parties would refuse, but as the talks thus inevitably collapsed, more moderate and unaligned soldiers and militias have rallied around Otto, killing both Schuschnigg and Rüdiger in an explosion, of course blamed on communists. Forces loyal to Otto quickly assumed control in the capital and formed a new government with Otto von Habsburg as chancellor, all accepted by the president Wilhelm Miklas, who had managed to survive throughout all the chaos. With the OS and Heimwehr without their leaders and the army mostly in support of our new government, stability slowly returned to Vienna and the rest of the nation. As the worst days of the economic collapse are also over, it is time to turn a new chapter in Austrian history by initiating massive economic and political reforms. Setting our sights on economic recovery first, the Treaty of Saint-Germain has been a blessing in disguise, as the young men unable to serve in the army can now be put to work through voluntary service. We also gained significant aid from the Catholic Church, a bedrock of the Austrian state as it differentiates us from the Valkists, through investment into education, charity and much more. Having appointed the president of the Österreichische Nationalbank as economic minister, he would see through important fiscal reforms to stop wasteful spending. Almost immediately causing protests, it shows the people don't yet fully trust our new Habsburg-led government. We must start building up Otto's legitimacy. Setting our sights on the nobles of the old, we passed legislation to reinstate their titles lost after the formation of the Republic. While maybe not gaining some sympathy from leftist workers, the nobility are still a part of the political ruling class, and by allying them we've gained a significant amount of legitimacy, at least to continue our economic reforms. While the economic crash originated in the cities, our farmers were hit especially hard, forcing us to bail them out. Looking back to the infrastructure improvements of the voluntary service, we initiated a mass electrification campaign to catch up with our neighbors. Starting in the north, we will make sure to eventually cover the whole territory. And to supply the growing need for electricity, we began the construction of the Tauern hydroelectric power plant. Completely unrelated to our economic and government reforms, our diplomats have scored the biggest win for Austria since before the Great War, convincing the French and Italians that the Treaty of Saint-Germain only serves to strengthen the German Reich as it leaves us unable to defend ourselves. They agreed to tear up the treaty for the greater good of Europe, even guaranteeing our independence in the process. Since then, our army has already started rearming itself, reaching 100,000 men in the field, with 150 on the horizon as conscription has been allowed. Still, as the Germans have yet to act on their aggressive rhetoric, our main focus remains on the reforms. Continuing the infrastructure initiatives, both general construction and more focused on our railways, the economy is starting to fully heal up, which opens up for spending on other areas. Especially as we ended our austerity measures and actually allowed for more spending. Investing into the University of Vienna, we will restore the institution's prestige as the cutting edge of Austrian exceptionalism. With social programs also slowly reintroduced, the Republic has never been this stable, as the protests are slowly subsiding, unfortunately instead turning into worry. The German Reich has seized French weakness to reintegrate the Kiel Canal and Rhineland in less than a month, putting us as the next target. To ensure that our internal situation remains stable during the inevitable war, Otto has put forward a new imperial constitution. Still remaining as a republic and democracy, it will make the future restoration easier and allow our government to secure a loyal state apparatus before the war. Its most noticeable change was that it allowed for a change in president, as Wilhelm Miklas stepped down, allowing a more loyal president to the imperial cause to be put in place. With German forces arriving in greater and greater numbers along our border, we must act now and set in place a stable defensive plan. With only 150,000 deployed men, holding our entire border will be impossible. We must sacrifice the West to hold our heartland, creating a much shorter front and one that we are able to slightly fortify. As we looked to reform the general staff on this short time left, to open up for a modernization and reformation of the great army of old, the Germans sent their ultimatum demanding a referendum on unification. A direct violation of our independence, and knowing the Valkist ideology they will rig this election, so deny them we did. 2 weeks later they crossed our border, meeting zero resistance in Salzburg and Innsbruck, but still triggering a second Great War. France and Italy would immediately come to our protection, declaring war on Germany and their Dutch ally, which prompted a not-so-secret agreement between Yugoslavia and Germany to trigger, in turn causing Greece to join the Continental Entente. The German and Yugoslav armies would quickly seize all free territory, but as they arrived to our line of fortification, all probing attacks were repulsed with no issue. This buys us valuable time to further strengthen our army, as it will take some time for the Stahlpakt to plan a proper offensive. Increasing conscription as soon as we had the political power, we hope this can double our army size. And as a part of the general staff reform, we are recalling old officers from the time of the Empire and promoting those still in place, both to bring back the expertise of a grand army but also secure greater legitimacy. The following days we continued holding off a few minor German attacks, but seeing how they hadn't committed any more troops to the front yet, Theodor Körner, our general in charge of the defensive line, decided to partially abandon the plan by launching a small counter-offensive, liberating the occupied parts of Linz to establish a defensive line along the Inn River and restoring the Austrian flag in Salzburg. An important liberation, since the city is the main hub of military production in our country. From this point on, the Germans, realizing we wouldn't fall easily, started committing more and more troops with relentless attacks. Being on the defensive, we quickly racked up kills, reaching 50,000 together with Yugoslav casualties compared to our losses of 20,000. Unfortunately, without any fortifications, lacking entrenchment and a larger front, we started losing too much, forcing us to retreat from our gains and return to the more stable defensive line. Being able to hold a lot easier from here, despite the constant German bombing, we can safely continue to improve our army. With 3 divisions in training already, we will simultaneously restore the common army of Austria-Hungary, deploying 2 more divisions in Vienna. At the same time, the general staff reform continues as our military academy is being modernized together with our military doctrines. A focus on defensive postures, which so far has proved successful. While we haven't joined the Continental Entente outright, we are more than thankful for their constant sacrifices for our freedom. The Italian offensives have been largely ineffective, but in recent days the French have broken through in the Rhineland, first capturing only the Saarland, but now even having crossed the Rhine. This has significantly slowed down the German attacks against us, especially considering we have inflicted a total of 100,000 casualties at the same time as French forces continue to advance into their heartland. Arriving to Augsburg on the 19th of August 1938, 150 days after the war began, we have decided to re-put some pressure ourselves. Reusing our old battle plan, we met far more resistance this time around, as the Germans already knew about it. Still, we saw the same advances, at least in the beginning. What differed was that we were unable to capture Salzburg, instead capturing our first core German lands along the Czech border. With our offensive succeeding in putting extra pressure, the French have been able to reach the Czech border themselves, dividing mainland Germany from their southern army group. Unfortunately, with horrible supply due to German bombers, we can't take advantage of it straight away, but at least the Germans are suffering more, and we can actually do something about it, as we are working on expanding our logistical capabilities. While waiting for these improvements, the Germans took a massive risk, declaring war on Belgium, maybe in an attempt to outflank the French invasion, but this only serves to strengthen the Continental Entente. With the fall of München to French forces only days later, the German Reich is 26% towards capitulation, 1% more than us. So, inspired, we restarted our offensives, using our 3 newly deployed units to concentrate an attack on Salzburg, recapturing the city for a second time. In the north, the French forces had reached ours, even encircling 1 German division. Helping them to enlarge in this connection, we captured the railway line from Regensburg to Linz, connecting us with the Continental Entente. Simultaneously, the French had liberated our territories in the west, ending the German bombing runs in the process, as Innsbruck was their only base of operations left. It has also given us important economic benefits. Losing half your country obviously hurts a lot, but now that most of it is regained and trade with the Entente can be boosted, we are seeing a complete recovery. Though the keen-eyed know our nation is yet liberated, Klagenfurt even remains completely occupied. Unfortunately, the way forwards from here is far harder. The German Southern Army is helped by the Yugoslavs, and being fully supplied in mountainous terrain makes the enemy forces almost impossible to defeat. We've decided to instead help the French out by sending over 7 infantry divisions to the main German front, and through concentrated attacks defeat the Germans faster. The first offensive of this type was slightly slowed down by Hungary joining the Stahlpact and forcing us to scramble a defense of Burgenland and Wien. But as we didn't lose a single inch of land, we could quickly return to Germany. party stands victorious, the German Reich is defeated and extremism purged. Thanks to not being a part of the Continental Entente, our diplomats have been able to get a great deal in the peace conference, annexing Bavaria and Baden-Württemberg. With the strong presence of the Catholic Church in the region and the population being closer to Wien than Berlin, we will hopefully be able to integrate the region in 1 or 2 generations. The rest of Germany was divided between France and Poland, who had joined the war in the last months. But just because the great evil is defeated doesn't mean the fight is over. Its minions in Yugoslavia and Hungary remain fighting on our soil as well. Though with the Germans out of the picture, the Yugoslav and Hungarian forces in our lands were extremely disorganized, allowing us to make gains despite the mountainous terrain. With Poland already having pushed deep into Hungary, we helped them out from the other side, capturing Győr and defeating the Bratislava pocket despite big resistance. This would be the final straw for the Hungarian Republic, capitulating days later and leaving Yugoslavia all alone. With the Entente already having captured most of Croatia, there only remained one Yugoslav army group up north, protecting Maribor. But encircled from all sides, there were no issues for us defeating their 14 divisions, allowing us to help in the final offensive. Together with the French, Italian and Greek forces, we marched to Belgrade, reaching the capital city with minimal losses and causing the last enemy forces to capitulate. In the following 2 peace deals, our diplomats continued working overtime. With Poland, we managed to reach an agreement of exchanging Bratislava for southern Hungary, and somehow we convinced the French and Italians to give away big parts of northern Yugoslavia. All this new land clearly shows our intentions of restoring the old empire, but before we can constitutionalize our claims, we must lay out a solution to the issue that the vast empire and multiple ethnic groups brought with it. We must be far more lenient than we were before, setting up a federation instead of a strong-armed, centralized government in Wien. At the same time, we also need to fix our legacy of authoritarianism and replace it with an imperial democracy of Otto's vision, entering a coalition with other pro-democracy parties. Whether they are for or against the monarchy, we will prop them up with pro-democracy propaganda to defeat the both sides of extremism. This has gained us enough support both from the political establishment and the people to finally declare the restoration of the Kingdom of Austria with Otto von Habsburg, the new Kaiser von Österreich. And with this proclamation we have reclaimed our imperial claims as a rightful part of our empire. This has greatly angered the Entente, but despite our coming expansive wars, we are certain about continued peace between us. Firstly, because we would become a strong buffer state between the West and the growing threat of the Soviet Union, and secondly because they are not about to go to war with the nation they just sacrificed hundreds of thousands of men to save from subjugation. Having already expanded our army to 350,000 men and upgraded our Alpenjägers to play a more important offensive role, we stand relatively ready for war. Though with only 30,000 men in reserve, with already extensive conscription, we need to look elsewhere for men. And that elsewhere were students. Otto has long been supported by the pro-European, pro-democracy and pro-empire fraternity Ottonen. Strengthening them will allow us to recruit their members, many of whom aren't Austrian nationals, straight to the army. So standing as ready as we can get, we declared war on the Republic of Czechia, who has refused to accept our empire. Deploying siege artillery and our Alpenjägers in a concentrated offensive towards Brno, we quickly broke through, captured the city and took a pause to reorganize. After pushing back a minor counter-offensive, we restarted going to the north and encircling an important part of the Czech army to the east. While we tried to ignore them to first capture the capital, we started becoming overstretched, forcing us to deal with the pocket. Easily destroying all 10 divisions, Prague stood next on the menu and eat it we did, capitulating the Czech and annexing the nation. This leaves the Polish and their sphere of influence left before we can proclaim the rebirth of Austria-Hungary itself, not only the Austrian kingdom that we are today. But having a far larger army than us, we will need significant preparations. More divisions will be trained and we will restart the army reforms. integrating former moderate militia men but still making sure loyalty is maintained at its highest degree, which includes keeping extremist generals in check to create an army of defenders of democracy. Lastly, enforcing a strict doctrine, one of defense, learned by our failures in Insonso, we will make sure the Polish army aren't able to advance a single meter. On the ground, we now possess an army of over 500,000, having also constructed 2 railway guns to give us the edge needed. And in addition to having equipped all our forces with anti-air guns, learning from the German war, we've started building up our own air force. Though which won't come up to the task before the war. Because with the Soviet invasion of Belarus and Ukraine putting pressure from the east and Poland finding itself in conflict with the legionary state of Romania, we declared war on the nation. And thanks to this element of surprise, we started the war with a bang. The rebirth of Austria-Hungary has arrived. Our reformed empire spans from Oberbaden to Transylvania, forming a bastion of Christian democracy in Central Europe. Through the brilliant reforms of Otto, local parliaments and special autonomies have already been set up to decentralize our government. While it comes at a cost of less resources and factories for the central government, it has removed most local resistance and increased compliance significantly. And to honor this new order, we will rename our nation into the Danube Federation, ensuring a collapse like that after the Great War can never occur again. The future is bright. Thanks for watching today's video, I hope you enjoyed it and I'll see you in the next one.